Welcome to See, Hear, Feel. Today I am with Dr. Phillip McKee. Dr. McKee asked me to introduce him very simply as a lover of Ferraris, a lover of his wife, and a lover of dermatopathology. I want to go into a little bit more detail. Dr. Phillip McKee is a fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists and received his medical degree from Queen's University in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He trained in pathology at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast and completed a dermatopathology fellowship at St. John's Hospital for Diseases of the Skin in London. He worked in both London and at various places in the U.S., including Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, as Director of Dermatopathology and Associate Professor of Pathology at Harvard Medical School. He has authored and edited several books, including The Amazing Pathology of the Skin, that I first read as a dermatopathology fellow, really had a huge influence on me. And that edition that I fell in love with won several medical book awards. He was awarded the Elson B. Helwig Lecture Award in 2003 by the American Society of Dermatopathology. As I said, sort of in his personal life, his passions do include Ferraris and high-speed driving. He is married to a retired cytopathologist who was also a professor at Harvard Medical School, and she is now a full-time artist. And he also has 4 adult children with very varied interests. So welcome to Dr. McKee.
It's a pleasure to be here. I think for my own safety, we need to change the priorities to my wife first. I think Ferrari comes second, truthfully, and then dermatopathology. This keeps me out of trouble.
That's wonderful. And you've been married for?
We've been married for about 30 years. I think the important thing is we're best friends. We met in London. We got married in the UK long before I managed to escape the UK on the second Mayflower and ended up in Boston. I've had a lot of wonderful experiences in terms of where I've lived and where I've worked.
It's interesting when you mention these various places that you've lived, and also many of them you practiced in. The culture at work and even in each city is probably quite different.
It was very difficult for me when I moved to Boston. The mindset of trainee staff in the UK is very different from the USA. And I had to change, or I didn't succeed really, but I had to change how I approached staff a lot to try and fit into the way things worked in Boston, and that was quite stressful for me because I had to think, now, can I say this? Is this allowable? And frequently I would say it and discovered it wasn't allowable. And the chairman would want to see me to discuss my various misdemeanors. And I think I probably brought a bit of common sense to the trainees that I think they were lacking. And they brought a bit of being more aware of sensibilities to me. So I think we both gained by it.
Yeah, I think that is my concept of emotional intelligence, is where you're aware that there are differences in perspective, basically, and how you relate to someone, because emotional intelligence is really about building relationships. So when you're at a scope or you're teaching someone and you're from, you came from London and then we're in Boston, it's true, probably the way that you establish relationships with your trainees and with the staff and the people around you were quite different if the sort of the mindset and the culture were different.
There were 2 things at play, really. One was that the residents and fellows were much older because they'd all worked they'd all done their postdoc work and they were working in labs. So they were high flyers. And then they had to come and do pathology, which I don't think they really wanted to do because they wanted to work in the lab, but they had to do it. And so they were more much more mature. You see, the average age of a resident in the UK would have been 23, 24, whereas in Boston they were in their 30s. So that made a big difference. And I had to be much more gentle, and I tried to be less sarcastic, although sometimes it's quite hard not to be, because sarcasm is a British trait. Whereas in America, people tend not to be as sarcastic as the Brits. I think the thing is, you see, I I've always taken the viewpoint that my residents and fellows are family. I've always thought of them as sons and daughters. And as with my kids at home, I would tell them when I thought they were not doing things right in no uncertain terms. And that worked in the UK. But in the US, uh, the family bit worked, but I had to be a very gentle father.
Yes. I think that's true that in the US there is a sensibility, I guess, that the bare truth is somehow not nice.
Correct.
But I've also heard it's sort of a lot of Brene Brown's work on vulnerability and what kindness, sort of being nice in a way, but kindness really means. And she talks about it's not actually kind to not give correct feedback that's needed to help someone improve.
Yeah, well, I think that's true, but it can be quite difficult. If someone comes up with a complete nonsense diagnosis, it's quite difficult not to say, "Oh, don't talk such nonsense." You have to think of a way of trying to get them to think again, and perhaps give them a clue. Say that this is melanocytic, not sweat gland, or not inflammatory. Like for me now, I've been doing pathology for over 51 years, and I have to remind myself sometimes that someone who's done it for 3 months hasn't done very much.
Right.
And so there's the discrepancy. I have to be aware of that and make myself aware of it.
So awareness is important. I think, as you said, it's important to be aware of how you're coming across. And but how did you make adjustments to that? You would just try to be aware.
Once I think that's one of the critical things to succeeding in whatever you do, is being confident in yourself and of yourself. And when you've got that, then the world's your oyster.
Emotional intelligence, which is really being aware of the relationship that you're cultivating. And when you give a lecture, when you're doing grand rounds, teaching at the scope, those are all forms of public speaking. And I think, as you just touched on, if I have confidence as a teacher or as a speaker, that is transmitted to the audience, whether it's one person at the scope or the grand round situation or an international lecture. Conversely, if I'm not feeling confident, the audience feels that and also is uncomfortable. And same thing with your happiness. When you're happy, presenting the slides on the fly, as you do very well, the audience feels that. I think your happiness is contagious, and so they're happy. But I like that. That's amazing that you're also really, I think, in the moment, aware of how the audience is feeling. And if you start to feel that they're unhappy, you are probably adjusting right in the moment. And possibly because you don't prepare like every single word you're going to say, and you know at another extreme, like reading off pre-prepared notes word by word, you have the ability to adjust in the moment. Oh, this person or the whole group seems like they're lost, and you can reset more actively perhaps. But of course it takes great skill to be able to do that. Have you ever struggled with any degree of burnout?
I got burnt out by writing books. Yes, because when I did the fourth edition of Pathology of the Skin, I was working on three other books at the same time. And I used to be up until 2 in the morning and up again at 6 in the morning. This is when I was living in Arizona. It was a nightmare. And I think I sort of did myself quite a lot of harm doing that. It was not a great decision to make. So my recommendation to anybody else who's listening to this is don't try and write more than one book at a time. I was very lucky actually. I took Gracie on as an editor, so I got her to edit my text so that she could pick up on any of the mistakes that I'd made, which were numerous. So
It's
they
good.
became team efforts.
It's good to have a best friend like that.
It is. It sure is.
We need to somehow also be able to ask for help. As when you were writing multiple books at one time, you hired on your best friend as an editor, and to help you out. And we need to be able to hopefully work in a safe enough space where we can ask for help and get the help that we need, I suppose, and have colleagues and family and friends and multiple people around us who are willing to be there for us. Do you have any final thoughts on just work life balance? Because you've accomplished so much in your life in so many different geographic locations. You have such a wonderful relationship with your wife. You have 4 adult children. You have trainees probably all over the world. And you continue to make new, strong relationships through your Facebook page and through your consultations. Do you have any advice on that?
To get our balance between work and non-work is very difficult. I think the only thing I can say is you have to know when you can't do any more. You have to realize whether it's 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whenever it is, you have to realize, okay, any more and I'm not safe. My concentration is gone. And so you must stop then. People are always wanting stuff. And I never can say no. That's my problem. So I think if you can learn to say no, that would be a very useful attribute. And if you learn how to do it, you can send me an email and then I'll know how to say no.
So, everyone's homework is if you know how to say no, send Dr. McKee an email or a note on his Facebook page as to your tips on saying no. Well, thank you very much for recording, for doing this, for speaking to me and anyone who's listening in. I really appreciate it.
The pleasure was mine. It's been quite an interesting experience, and I hope I've managed to pass on a few tips to practicing and would be budding dermatopathologists and pathologists.
Definitely, I think so. Thank you.